On today's show, now that the All-Star game is done, now that the Home Run Derby's done, it officially feels like the first half of Padres baseball is done, and I want to talk about some of my biggest surprises of the season so far for the Padres, both the good and the bad, and talked about the aforementioned All-Star stuff, because I had quite a good time watching them. I'm going to tell you exactly why on today's episode. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Wednesday, July 17th. As always, I'm your host with sometimes occasionally, but certainly not always the most, Javier Reyes. You can follow me on Twitter at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO, Twitter/X. Also at LO_Padres as well on that old app if you want to just have updates for the show only. I've been tweeting a bunch of nonsense lately on my personal account, frankly, and if you follow me on there, apologies if you only want Padres stuff. I'll get back to that, but it was the All-Star break. What do you want from me? It's been a little bit of a slow last couple of weeks. So go check me out on there, and also go check out my new podcast, Baseball versus the World. Just did an episode talking about the worst uniforms in baseball history, and the Padres might have been involved. So go check that out if you'd like. Today's episode, guys, it's going to be a nice little fun one. Look, we got to do recaps, man. It's like, when you get to like the end of the year and everyone starts doing their best of lists, that's kind of what we're doing here, except it's specifically just for the first half of Padres baseball. So I'm going to be talking about my biggest surprises and then some of the good ones and then some of the bad ones, and then talk a little bit about All-Star stuff. Just give some of my thoughts, I guess, on what happened this week. And I thought it was very good. I thought it was a lot of fun. But first, let me just tell you guys, today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use that code, all lowercase, LockedOnMLB, for a first deposit match up to $100. Without further ado, let's get into it. In terms of the biggest surprises of the season so far, I think that there's been a decent amount. I think that this has been a season full of a lot of surprises in a rudimentary level, like the ground level of just players overall. And it's funny that there's been so many surprising developments for this team, despite the fact that they're basically at a similar spot that they were last year, right? Like, that's kind of the situation that we're in when it comes to the Padres. So while there has been a lot of good, which we're going to talk about the good first, it is unfortunate that the good hasn't resulted in a significantly better season than last year. I think it's been a good season in terms of vibes, but just in strictly the binary, the record, not all that amazing, right? In the first half last season, the Padres finished 43-47. This year, 59-49. Oh, hold on. I said that really wrong. What is it, 50-49, right? That's our record, right? Oh, God, I cover this team. I should probably know that. 50-49 on the season. So it is still better than last year. They're not actively, behind the eight ball as they were last year. But even still, it is a little bit annoying that they've had all the things that went poorly for the team last year, at least some of the things that went poorly for the team last year, have been almost entirely ameliorated. And look at where they are, right? Just a little bit better than last year. But even still, want to throw out there 43-47 versus 50-49. I take the latter every time. In terms of the biggest surprises, let's talk about some of the positives. For me, I think you have to start here. And speaking of All-Star, it's easy. The biggest surprise for me in general this year so far, I just want to get it out of the way first because we know what it is, and that is Jurickson Profar. In general, there is so much to take away from this. The fact that the Padres traded Juan Soto, and Trent Grisham, frankly. You lost two out of your three starting outfielders, and then you replaced it with two All-Stars. So, like, in a vacuum, you make that deal every time, right? Obviously, you would rather have Juan Soto on this team. He's a better player than Jurickson Profar. He's better than basically everybody on the team, more or less, except Tatis when he's feeling it. Tatis is the only one that might have a shot at challenging Soto for that because of the defense, because of the overall stuff, right? But in general, Juan Soto is so much better. But what Jurickson Profar has done, and I've said this all year, and I don't care if you've heard it before, I'm going to say it again, Jurickson Profar is a delight. He was brought in on a one-year, $1 million deal, and he was basically just viewed as this guy who was a vibes king. For some reason, he always played better with the Padres, but even still, he was expected to be some backup outfielder. I remember the early days of the offseason when fans Sometimes, occasionally, I would get a DM about this. Why aren't they signing Tommy Pham to play left field? Why aren't they doing this? Now, I think that those concerns weren't foolish or ill-wrought, right? Like, I still think that that is a fair criticism, that this team had some extra money to spend and they didn't just go out and get Tommy Pham. And I don't necessarily think that the Padres knew what they were getting, that they were going to get Jurickson Profar, who has never had a WRC plus over 113 in his life, which is, by the way, not bad. Like, that's pretty good. Like, that was in his 2020 season with the Padres. This is a guy who was the worst qualified player in Major League Baseball last year, minus 1.7 wins above replacement, according to Fangraphs. And now he's got 3 wins above replacement and a 152 WRC plus. He's hitting 300. The highest he's ever hit in his career is 254, right? Like, this is unbelievable stuff. He's always had the ability to put together good at-bats. He has good plate discipline. We saw that with the Padres. Again, 2.5 wins above replacement for the Padres in 2021. His best Major League season by a wide margin, right? Or 2022, I'm sorry. But for him to do what he's doing, and for him to not only be just a great vibes player, but to also easily be the player responsible for the most memorable moments of the season. And I mean that seriously, because it's possible to be great and then not feel all that memorable. Juan Soto last year, right? Objectively a great player, and it's not his fault, but he wasn't that memorable. What Jurickson Profar is doing this year is genuinely unprecedented in my time covering baseball. That's how surprising this is. Not only is he a good player, not only is he becoming a good player after like 10 years. This guy's been in the league since he was 19 years old. And for him to finally break out at age 31 is unprecedented, especially when he's basically never been all that good before then. He's had a couple of productive seasons, and I think his high prospect ceiling back in the early days, combined with the fact that he has really good plate discipline, like he's always been at least good at that, has kept him in the league. For him to carve out this role for himself, the only comp that you could come up with in terms of this type of arc for a Major League player is R.A. Dickey, who famously won his Cy Young at like age 36, right? And he basically was nothing before then. And he only had that 1 year, right? So hopefully that part doesn't repeat itself, but Jurickson Profar, the fact that he's been so unbelievably good, one of the best players, if not the best, in all of baseball in high leverage situations with runners in scoring position. It's amazing. And like I said, the moments, whether it be the walk-off against the Nationals, whether it be the Will Smith irrelevant thing. By the way, speaking of Will Smith, apologized the other day for saying that. Just really, really good stuff from Jurickson Profar. Easily number one most surprising thing. Moving on, though. Robert Suarez. Does he deserve to be called surprising? He is a player that kind of was expected to be better based on what the Padres did, which is extending him for all that money that they gave him. But I do think it says a lot that Robert Suarez has been able to be as dominant as he has been. Now, again, I know that like if you go to Fangraphs and you look at wins above replacement, he's not the first reliever. It's actually Adrian Morejon and then Jeremiah Estrada. I don't listen to that nonsense because I actually think that wins above replacement for pitchers is stupid most of the time. I just don't like it. You know what I mean? I understand that his peripherals are higher, right? He's got a 3.07 expected ERA compared to his 1.67, a FIP of 3.32, xFIP of 3.87, but I don't care. Bottom line is this guy has made a bounce back to a level that I don't think I anticipated, right? He's been good. I still don't think he's like this incredible elite closer that I want over everyone ever, right? Like, I don't think this is prime Mariano Rivera or anything like that, even with the ERA, because I do think the expected stats mean something for going forward. But in terms of this very season, this is a guy that we were worried about. And for him to fill in basically 100% for Josh Hader and be just as good, if not better than him this year, to lower the walk rate that he had, even when he was good, even when he had his breakout rookie season, when he struck out 31.9% of batters, he had an 11% walk rate. He has a lower walk rate this year. So that's really good, which is why I kind of don't fully understand those expected stats by him. He's literally lowered his walk rate. And you guys these numbers are just ignoring that everybody who comes up is getting struck out by this guy. But even still, really good season for him so far. I'm just a little bit surprised by how well he's filled in. Another surprising thing, though, in the positive, is our guy Jackson Merrill. And I don't just mean him being good, because in fairness, the guy was a top-level prospect. He was the number one or number two, depending on whatever website or whoever you like to go to, expert-wise, for their take on the matter. This was like the number one prospect in the Padres system. So it's not entirely surprising that he's at least been a productive player, or at least a good player. But there are some specific things about Jackson Merrill that have surprised me. I'm going to talk about those things in just a second, guys. But first, I want to talk to you about our good friends over at Supply House. Folks, that's right, it's ad read time. Get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trades, supplyhouse.com. It's the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, electrical products, all that sort of stuff to keep your home maintained. That's what they've got for you over at Supply House. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. That's right. This ain't some local deal, folks. Oh yeah, we got you coast to coast on here, everybody. It's really great. Pros in the skilled trade, they can also help you out. They've got some experts that can help you out with what you might need when you're going on there. So again, go check it out. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at supplyhouse.com/TM and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks. Again, from supplyhouse.com. But of course, that's not it. Everybody. No, not just yet. We got to talk about Prize Picks as usual because Prize Picks is be lovely. Folks, here's the thing about Prize Picks. I'm going to give you some numbers. First of all, it is the #1 daily fantasy sports app out there with 5 million active members. All you do is you pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. So if you want over on certain bases, obviously we don't got stuff right now, but if you want over on bases, if you want over on strikeouts, if you want under on certain strikeouts, if you want walks, if you want home runs, if you want hits, if you want doubles, whatever you got, they've got you, man. That's what they do. You can get on the daily action with your friends and become part of the Prize Picks community today. All sorts of deals nonstop too, right? That's what I really like. You can turn $100 into $100,000 with Prize Picks. Not literally, more like, 10 to 100 or something like that, or 10 to 1,000. But that's still great. And they have all these different kind of promotions to help make that easier for you, from lowering select player stat projections on Tuesdays to help your lineup hit, or getting your entry fees back if you have a losing lineup on Fridays. With the finals over, we're in all-star haven right now. We still got baseball stuff. You're going to have NFL futures coming up soon. You're going to have NFL daily stuff coming soon. We're right there to football. College football just came out, the game at least. So college football we're wrapping up, but you also have WNBA stuff with Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark, or the big stars like Breanna Stewart and Aja Wilson. You can bet big on all of these folks, watching them ball out. It's available in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. So go check that out to see. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB over at Prize Picks for a deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with the old Prize Picks. And just like that, folks, we are back here on the Locked On Padres podcast. A little cameo from my guy, Miles Morales. Thriving and vibing as always. Let's continue talking about some of the biggest surprises of this season so far. And what I talked about before the break was Jackson Merrill. And I don't want to be the, oh, wow, I'm surprised that he's so good so quickly. There are specific things that I'm surprised about with Jackson Merrill, right? I'm not surprised that he's a guy that gets good contact with the ball. You know why? Because for 3 years, I've been told this guy's hit tool is genuinely astounding, and that's what's going to carry him in the major leagues, right? Does he whiff at some pitches? Yes. Does he not draw a lot of walks? Yes. Does he chase? Yes. Well, not necessarily whiff, I'm sorry. He does chase and he doesn't get a lot of walks. Of course, but that kind of fits what we might have expected. And considering he is a golden egg type of prospect, those guys are less and less surprising to me when they turn out to be pretty good, even their first year. Even if he's still just a 21-year-old kid, that's not as surprising because, again, it's the top level prospects. Those top 10 guys doesn't surprise me as much anymore if they're at least pretty good coming out of the gate, or at least useful. Let's say Anthony Volpe last year, right? Like a solid sort of rookie season, all things considered. Now he's been, he's feeling the ire of New York fans everywhere, but doesn't surprise me that much. There are 2 things that surprise me with Jackson Merrill. Number 1 is his attitude. And again, I know we're not bringing up numbers here, but who said this has to be all numbers? Jackson Merrill's attitude. The fact that he already feels like one of the alphas on this team with his attitude in interviews, the way he talks about caring about winning, the way you see him celebrating with teammates, that part I don't know. I'm just surprised by that, especially considering there are some huge personalities with this Padres team. All-star MVP caliber players, from Manny to Tatis to even Yu Darvish to Joe Musgrove to Dylan Cease, who just got brought in, to some of the guys in the bullpen, everything. Right? For this team to have this many different characters on this team, and for him to just already stand out personality-wise, I think is a little bit surprising. That's always going to be surprising. So shouts to him for that. And then number 2 is a more statistical thing. It is the fact that he's tapped into power at this young of an age. 12 home runs on the year. But most importantly, an isolated power mark of 157. That's like better in some degrees than I think people were expecting, considering he had a 171 in AA, and in high A he had a 165. I'm just a little bit surprised that it's kind of translated pretty well. WRC plus of 113 on the year. He's been a great defensive player. That's another thing that's a little bit surprising. For you to go from shortstop to center field, that's going to be surprising. I understand that shortstops are like the most athletic position, so they're the ones that you can kind of bet on. But for you to be a 21-year-old kid, you're filling in because they need you, because they trade their whole outfield. And for you to not only be good there, but also thrive, says a lot. But for me, it's the power stroke. I just did not expect this to be something that he would tap into. He's literally surpassed his home run career total. He has 12 home runs this year. The most he had was in high A when he had 10 in 68 games. Don't get me wrong, yeah, that's on pace for what he had now, but he wasn't like a super duper power guy. That's never something that he was good at, right? And for me, though, it's the isolated power mark, which has been growing by the day, basically, which is great, and his launch angle. In July, his launch angle actually went up to 15 compared to like the 10 and 11 in prior months. Yes, his whiffs went up, but he supplemented it with power. I did not expect him to tap into the power that he's been tapping into this year so far. So that's the biggest thing for me. It's his alpha mindset, it's the personality and standing out, and then it is the power. I did not see that coming, at least at the beginning of his tenure with the Padres. I thought like down the line, like in a few years, or maybe even next year, this could be like a 20 home run guy. He might be a 25 home run guy already, right? Like that's not impossible that happens for him. So good stuff from Jackson Merrill. Another surprise for me this year, Kyle Higashioka. It's a quick one, but how can you not be surprised at Kyle Higashioka? This is a guy who basically was brought in, and I love this part of the trade. And again, when are we going to talk about that, by the way? Did the Padres win the trade? Can we talk about that? In a vacuum. They lose because they had to trade him in the first place and they signed everybody else except him. But I'm just saying, like, in a vacuum, did the Padres win the trade? Because not only did they get some like extra, pitching help with Randy Vasquez, Johnny Brito. I know they've been a little bit I personally think that Vasquez has more potential. I really do. I think that maybe he needs to be a reliever potentially, but I still think he's got potential. But not only did you get pieces that led to you acquiring Dylan Cease, but also Michael King's been great. And also Kyle Higashioka has been very, very, very good so far this year. 1.2 wins above replacement. His career high in that is 1.7. And he's already surpassed his home run total. In 41 games, 11 home runs in 41 games is absurd. I don't think he's going to keep this up, right? I don't think you're going to be a guy who slugs 525, but for what he's done so far as a backup catcher, considering that the Campy Hive was so strong and so powerful, and by the way, was strong and powerful for the beginning of this season, by the way. Campy was playing very well, especially offensively. And then for him to fall off a cliff and then Higgy come in, you would think, okay, this is a guy who's just going to be a super minus offensively. He's never had a WRC plus above 86 in his career. Or I'm sorry, yes he did, in 2020, whatever. I'm sorry, in the 16 games he played in 2020. But you get my point. For him to turn into this power-hitting guy, like, it's been impressive, man. So Higgy obviously deserves some credit. That is very surprising that the backup catcher not only would hit for power, but be better than Luis Campusano in half the games. Impressive stuff. Lastly, though, it's Matt Waldron. Waldron is easily, I would argue, almost, no, it's still Profar. Profar is still the most surprising thing in the joyful way this year for the Padres so far, but Waldron is very close. The Padres have, in my time covering this team, and I feel like prior to that, people might, people from who cover this team longer than me, people from the yesteryear, whatever, might say, yeah, I mean, I remember when the team had Andrew Kashner and he didn't turn out good, right? Everyone was like, okay, they traded Rizzo for him. He's a young superstar prospect. I still think that there's another world. Maybe if he's not on the Padres and a better team brings him in, maybe he turns into a much better, much higher quality, consistent starting pitcher. Although, don't get me wrong, I would kill for Andrew Cashner right now in this rotation, but they needed him to be better. And then you look at these past few years when you look at a lot of the prospects that they've had. Mackenzie Gore's arc was really weird. This is the top pitching prospect in baseball who's off of top 100 entirely after a couple things, right? So all of that combined, this is just a team that you've never seen bring in, Adrian Morejon as a starting pitcher didn't work out. Dinelson Lamet didn't work out. Mike Clevenger didn't work out. And I know that Clevenger was a trade. I understand that. But even still, this is just not a team that you're used to procuring starting pitching, I think is the term I'll use for it, out of nowhere, like so many other teams are often able to do, especially teams that are contenders. And Matt Waldron has been that. And he's been that and more. So far on the year, he has been amazing. And basically ever since that bad start against the Diamondbacks, he's been pretty great. 3.71 ERA, expected ERA of 3.79. He's got a decent, okay strikeout rate, all things considered, 21.2%, 7% walk rate. He's just been really, really solid, man. And this is a guy that, hasn't given up too much hard contact. He has a couple starts that are really rough with the knuckleball, not always being super on point, but he's been great. And he's been the type of player that you needed because this team has had so many starting pitching injuries. So I am very surprised at how good Matt Waldron has been, especially because with the trade, you thought, oh, maybe it's going to be Burrito that steps up, or maybe it's going to be Randy Vasquez that steps up, or maybe they're just going to have to call up Robbie Snelling or Dylan Letsko or whatever, right? And instead, it's been Matt Waldron who's been super good and has basically saved, in my opinion, this Padres starting pitching staff because of the fact that Dylan Cease had such a bad fall off. I shouldn't say fall off, had such a bad stretch, considering the fact that Michael King had a really bad stretch to start the season, considering that Musgrove and Darvish have been in and out. You really needed a Matt Waldron, and it was super surprising, and he deserves a lot of credit for it, and I'm also surprised at how much his sweeper has developed, right? This is a thing that has increased in velocity over the months, and it's been super brutal. We knew he had a knuckleball. We didn't know that he'd, improve some of his secondary pitches, so those are the most surprising, joyful things. Now, folks, before we get into the last segment of the podcast, I need to take just a second to talk to you about our good old friends at the classic, the lovely, the delightful eBay, and specifically eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance: superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, new carpet, whatever, plenty more they've got on there. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for, and with eBay's guaranteed fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. They kind of give you like a little checkmark system. They're like, yeah, that'll work. Don't worry, you're not purchasing the wrong part, Mr. Reyes. Don't worry. We know you know jack nothing about cars. Don't worry. We got you covered. We got you here. We're going to help you out. And that's what I like about eBay Motors. They are here to help you out with all the parts you need at the prices you want. It's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home some huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. eBay guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. Go check that all out. And just like that, everybody, we are thriving and vibing into the final segment of this here podcast. I'm tempted to not talk about the sad things from this season and save that for tomorrow because I do have all-star thoughts. So you know what? I think we're going to pivot. We're going to save some of my less than happy surprises, I think, for this next season. No, you know what? Let's get through it right now. What am I saying? In terms of the sad things, let's go through these somewhat quickly, though. The saddest thing for me in terms of surprises, I have 4. Number 1, the record against the Rockies this year. Padres are 2-5. Again, we're not going to harp too much on all the negatives because there's plenty of negatives so far this season. But in my opinion, I'm feeling good. Well, sorry, I dropped something. I'm feeling pretty good. So shouts to them, kind of reminding me of why this team can be frustrated. 2-5 record against the Rockies this year. I'm putting this under surprises because while I imagine that a lot of people are looking at this being like, what are you talking about? We never play the Rockies well. I'm just a believer in regression to the mean. I'm a believer in things just kind of, getting better as time goes along, right? And for year to year, the thing's not staying stagnant. And for me, I'm just surprised that once again, the Padres aren't playing well against the Rockies. 2-5 record, they had the sweep, right? That was really bad. Kind of undoing a lot of ground that they gained, which has been a problem with this Padres team with the sweeps this year. But for me, and I get that the Rockies are a little bit better this year. I understand that. Brenton Doyle was an all-star, I'm pretty sure. Ryan McMahon has become an above average at bat. And Ezequiel Tovar is like a young, really interesting piece they have. He's had a pretty good season, mostly defensively though, but even still. And Elias Diaz is a pretty solid catcher, low-end catcher that's probably going to be on the move at the deadline. But even still, it's still a bad team. And for them to still like get hit by Charlie Blackmon, who I'm convinced literally only hits against the Padres, by the way. This is also a team that while they had those aforementioned players that stood up, their best player last year, Nolan Jones, has been dreadful this year in the 49 games that he played, 64 WRC plus. Look at the downfall from this man. 135 WRC plus last year, 64 this year. He was worth 3.5 wins last year, negative 0.6 this year. And they haven't gotten anything out of Chris Bryant. So while yes, they've made some strides, it's not a team that you should be getting swept by. And I genuinely thought like, it can't happen again, right? Right? What's that law about if something can happen, it will happen? I forgot what is Isaac Newton? I forgot what law that is. What's the law? I'm not very smart. You guys might have to help me out. But so yeah, in general, I'm just surprised that the Padres once again for like the 5th year in a row can't play against the Rockies. Last year's the only year since I've been covering this team since 2020. Or was it last year? No, I'm sorry. 2020 was the one time that they played the Rockies well. But last year they were just okay against them. And then every year aside from that, just bad against them. I'm surprised that that's kept up. Again, another thing that was surprising from the season in the bad way, Joe Musgrove's injuries is one that I have on here. And the reason I have it on here is because for you to be shut down at the end of last season, near July, early August, I'm blanking on exactly when, and for you to come back and still have injury problems and then go on the IL and then come off the IL and then go back on the IL, yes, I understand that if you've been following the Padres long enough, them being weird about injuries isn't all that surprising. But even still, I'm still surprised. Call me stupid and ignorant and naive, but whatever. I'm a little bit surprised by how badly he's been injured. I just don't feel like it's very common for guys to get shut down and then be just as hurt after an entire offseason. You know what I mean? So I'm a little bit surprised by that. And also, just in a vacuum, forget the injuries. For him to be as ineffective as he was, I understand that that's probably has to do with the injuries, but this has been literally one of the most consistent starters in all of baseball for going on like 4 years now. If you actually just look at his numbers, he's been really good. Even that last year he had with, Pittsburgh? Even that last year with Pittsburgh, he was still like an okay, pretty good starting pitcher. Right? So for him to be this bad, very disappointing and a little bit surprising. Then the bullpen, folks. Now, here's the thing with the bullpen with the Padres. I thought it was going to be great this year. I thought this was going to be the calling card for the team. You saw how much they put into it this offseason. You signed Yuki Matsui. You've got, give me a second. You brought in Usat Go, who of course got left for dead, right? Like he's no longer a thing. Usat Go. You make the trade for Eniel De Los Santos. You have all these new things. Adrian Morejon's in the bullpen now, right? All this sort of stuff. Randy Vasquez can be a bullpen guy every now and then if you needed him to be, right? You've called up some players. You have Johnny Brito sometimes calling out of the bullpen. It was just completely retooled, and I thought it was going to be good, and it has not been good. But for me specifically, you guys might be thinking, are you surprised in Tom Cosgrove? Yeah, a little bit. In 14 and a half innings, for you to have an ERA of 11.66, that is always going to be surprising, even if your xFIP last year was 4.91, right? Even if your xFIP was 4.91 last year, you still had some decent peripherals, so I'm a little bit surprised that you went from being a really solid reliever for the team last year to being unplayable. I don't care who it is, that's always surprising. And then Wandy Peralta, he might be a little bit surprising. I didn't mention him in terms of offseason acquisitions because I try to forget it. But for me, not quite as surprising, but still not great. This is a guy who had a really good season in 2022 for the Yankees. And then last year, despite the 2.83 ERA, he was walking 13.2% of batters, which is why he had such a bad field independent pitching. 5.69 FIP last year. or I'm sorry, 5.05 FIP last year. He can't strike anybody out. This is a guy whose strikeout rate is now at 13.6%, and he walks 8.2% of batters. So while, yes, he had a bad season last year, I have to admit, I'm just a little bit surprised that you've had your lowest strikeout rate since you were in Cincinnati in 2018, right? And at least in Cincinnati, you could say, oh, well, that's a tough ballpark. Here, I'm like, what's going on here? This is ridiculous. So Wandy Peralta's surprising there too. But mostly it's Enel de los Santos for me. I believed in this guy. I thought that it was a great acquisition. He had times last year where he was awesome, and he's from Cleveland. What's a team that we trust more with pitching than Cleveland? And instead, he's been worth negative 0.5 wins above replacement this year. This is a guy who the past couple of years had a solid ERA, 3.29 last year and 3.04 the year before that. Decent peripherals as well. His FIP last year, 3.48, not as good, but even still, like, all those guys, really surprising. I thought the Padres bullpen was going to be effective. It was effective last year. And considering that they lost Hader, how are you expecting them to be good? Well, they lost Hader, but then they replaced him with Suarez, who's been just as good, if not better in some regards. And they've still been bad. So that's surprising. But last but not least, in terms of the biggest surprise for this year, is Xander Bogaerts. I was so bullish on this guy last season. I was so bullish on this guy. I thought he was going to be awesome. I really did. I thought this was going to be a guy that came out and just showed everybody, you know what? He had an uncharacteristically bad year in the clutch. One of the worst qualified players in baseball with runners on base and certainly in high leverage situations. But overall, the hit stuff was there, right? He had a 120 WRC plus last year and he still had 4.7 wins above replacement. Xander Bogaerts was still good last year in a vacuum. Don't get me wrong, he wasn't great for the team because, like I said, he didn't drive anybody in. But the tools and the ability to hit were still there. 19 home runs, 8.4% walk rate, 16.5% strikeout rate. Those are good numbers. 285, 350, 440. That's just solid stuff, right? And I understand that, like, maybe he was getting lucky in some regards because his ground ball rate went up and his hard hit rate went down. But even still, I am still surprised that you go from last year to a 74 WRC plus at the time of this recording. It's still surprising. It was his first year. And also, by the way, to support the ground ball and hard hit rates going down, he got hit on the wrist last year. And then guess what happened? He was terrible for like a month and a half on that wrist that's been bothering him for years. And at the end of the season, he started raking again. So what happened? That's why, for me, Xander Bogaerts is super surprising in the disappointing sense. Because I really thought that what was going to happen is at minimum he would just be an okay player who can get you a couple doubles, right? He's going to hit you maybe 15 to 20 home runs at best and play like pretty decent defense over at shortstop. And this year he actually has played okay at second. But that's super surprising for me is how bad he's been in that regard. So yeah, everybody, those are my most surprising things from the first half of 2024 Padres baseball. I want to conclude the show just talking a little bit about All-Star vibes as promised. Really enjoyed the All-Star game. Really enjoyed the home run derby. I can't help but really wish that we had Tatis in there. I really wish we had Tatis in the All-Star, not only the All-Star game, but the home run derby. I just think he would be awesome in the home run derby. That guy knows how to seize a moment more than basically any other player in the entire sport. He's cool, he's fun, he's hip. Man, it would have been great if he was in the home run derby, but I loved it. I loved how it ended with Bobby Witt Jr. nearly getting the tying home run to potentially set it into more of a swing off or whatever it's called that they did. I thought the new format was great, and overall it was really fun, and it was interesting to see certain players not do great. Obviously, it stinks that we got a Dodger to win, but maybe this is unpopular opinion. I like Teoscar Hernandez. I think he's fun, and I think that his little relationship with Ohtani about how they're teaching each other like the languages, I think is really adorable. Like, I really do. I'm sorry, like, them both learning English together. I just think that that's a beautiful thing. Just the total different cultures. I love it. And frankly, I'm not mad at him because he's new. It's a 1-year deal. And also, blame the rest of Major League Baseball for not signing this guy. He was sitting there. And frankly, I thought it was obvious that his season with the Mariners, a hard hit ballpark to hit, by the way, for hitters, that he was off last year. I just really thought this guy's going to be good. I know I'm not saying that the Padres had room for him. Clearly, they were like, all right, we're going with Merrill, and that's fine. But there's so many teams across the league that could have used this guy, whether it be in the outfield or just as a DH, and nobody did it. And instead, the Dodgers were like, once again, I hate the Dodgers too, but sometimes they don't deserve hate. Sometimes I swear that team just sits around and they're like, oh, You don't want Mookie Betts? Yeah, sure. We'll give you a couple potato chips. That does work. Oh, great, cool. Like, I don't always blame them for that. I blame baseball and the infrastructure that has allowed it, basically. Anyway, really enjoyed that. And the All-Star game, Jurickson Profar getting on base and then scoring. He looked ecstatic, by the way, crossing home plate. The National League once again lost, by the way. I don't understand why they're incapable of winning the All-Star game. But him scoring, that was beautiful. After Ohtani hit a home run in the game, because of course he did, speaking of Dodgers. But I really did love that. Profar in this game, just kind of having, 1-for-2 day. That was fine. Gets himself a single. Jackson Merrill also gets into the game, and he gets a single too. 1-for-2 in the game. So really love that. In terms of other stuff, Robert Suarez didn't come in. 2 outs. 2 strikeouts. Love to see that. All the Padres All-Stars did well. Obviously, we didn't get anything from Luis Suarez. He sat out instead to rehab a little bit of an injury that's been nagging him. That's fine. Hopefully, he's better by the time we get back. But I think that in general, I think that what's so great about the All-Star festivities isn't necessarily now. I will say the only negative hot take for the end of the podcast, so maybe people don't realize I said this. I kind of wish when the game mattered. I kind of miss when winner of it got home field advantage. I just felt like it was unique and it added a little bit of an edge. Maybe that's just me. But Javi, it's an exhibition. Shut up. I know, but still, I don't know. It was fun. I'm sorry. I really enjoyed it. But whatever. For me, my biggest takeaway is this. I love making fun of Profar, right? I love doing that. I'm sorry, not Profar. I love making fun of baseball and the league and how messed up it is oftentimes in Major League Baseball. From genuinely nefarious things to the just annoying things, right? The one thing baseball has that the All-Star festivities are better than every other of the major sports. It's not even close. The NBA used to be there, right? NFL has never been there. Although their little games gimmick, maybe that'll kind of get better down the road, but they've done away with their Pro Bowl game because it was dumb. And speaking of nefarious, that league doesn't even pay their players fully guaranteed contracts. They make like $80 bajillion every 5 minutes in the day and night cycle, and they just can't give their players fully guaranteed contracts. So again, but baseball, its competitor used to be the NBA. But guess what? The dunk contest lost its juice because the NBA stars have been divas lately, and just like, I just feel like no one cares about the actual dunks anymore. No one has got really entertaining with it. I have been on a proponent of saying, like, I'm getting really off tangent here, but I've been a proponent of saying the All-Star weekend, the dunk contest should be like pro wrestling style, like what Blake Griffin did when he jumped over a car and brought in the choir, like bringing some theatricality to it. Otherwise, no one's going to care about players who can dunk really well and players that are good, but players that nobody knows. Sorry, no one cares about Aaron Gordon nearly as much. And LeBron James, you're a coward for never doing the dunk contest, right? So that has died off. And then you have the three-point contest, which can be a novelty, can be fun. I remember the one year it was actually literally more anticipated than the dunk contest because it had like Klay Thompson, JJ Redick, Steph Curry, whatever. But that has fallen off. I liked the Sabrina Ionescu versus Steph Curry thing last year. I thought that was really cool. Highlight some of the stars for the WNBA, and it was close. That was fun, but they're probably not going to do that again. And then lastly, the All-Star game. They went from not trying to literally walking on the court practically when they play. Just absolute garbage. And by the way, there's plenty of reasons for that. Not wanting to get hurt. Why am I going to play for extra money for no reason? It's the middle of the season. I need to rest. It's a long season. All that stuff. I get it, but it has gone really far. So I just want to shout baseball for having easily one thing that they are better at than everybody else. And it is All-Star festivities. People try. The Home Run Derby's electric. Who doesn't want to just see dingers for an hour? I love seeing it, and I can't wait for Tatis, hopefully, to be in there one day. So those are my thoughts on the All-Star festivities and the biggest surprises for the first half of San Diego Padres baseball. This has been a little bit longer of a podcast than I anticipated, but as always, you guys know how I am. Despite how mysterious and silly and just, hardworking I am, I still don't know how to shut the heck up, folks. And with that all being said, that about does it for today's edition of the Locked On Padres podcast. Tomorrow's episode, we're going to be talking about the biggest things to look for in the second half for the Padres. Going to be talking about that, the biggest things to keep an eye on. We'll keep it, hopefully keep it a shorter podcast than today's. Going to be getting into that. And then Friday's episode, we're doing a crossover with Jeff Ellis of Locked On Guardians, not just about this upcoming series, but also talk a little bit about the Padres draft and talk about one Sir Cash Mayfield. Jeff is a big, MLB, prospect scout guy. He really knows what he's talking about, so that should be a lot of fun, and that man does not miss. So, with all that being said, until next time, stay safe, and of course, stay faithful, my Fire Faithful homies. Take